Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 7. I'm your host, Blaine Burgess. I'm going to walk you through tonight's episode. And we're going to virtually hold hands for this one because it's a little bit heavy, a little bit dark. Finishing Season 2 with a bang for sure. But I felt like it was appropriate given all the things happening to me in life lately. And all kind of the signs from the universe, so to speak. So I'll walk you through that, like I said, and we're going to get through this together. I think it's a really important topic. It's not all that fun to talk about. For a lot of people, definitely something widely avoided. So to kick off the episode, this is a quote from a calendar thing that I have. I flip every day to a new quote. And this one happened to come up June 14th. It is now June 19th, I believe. So it's 3 or 4 days ago. After I recorded the last episode, we've been getting pretty deep into Dante's Inferno and Purgatorio explicitly and talking about different sins and really getting into all the forms of deficient love. And then this one came up, like I said, a couple of days after the last episode, and I just thought it was super appropriate for what we have going on this week. So the quote says, "If you seek security in life, unknowingly you seek death. No, the only true secure place is your grave." Really, to me, what that is saying, and that, by the way, that's a quote from Sadhguru. If you're not familiar, he is a decently famous guru from India who I follow pretty closely. I just listen to a lot of his stuff, and I think he has a very level head about him, despite being loved by millions of people. And he's definitely becoming more popular in America, and like I said, I'm an avid consumer of his stuff, and this quote is definitely one of my favorites from the calendar, and just a good reminder, I think, overall. Something also that I've seen to be true in my own life. To take you back about a year ago, so USA Weightlifting Nationals is happening this coming weekend in Pittsburgh, the 2024 edition, but 2023 they were in Colorado Springs a year ago. Just to give you a little background on that, so I had saved up some PTO at work. I love the state of Colorado, so I decided to basically take a little time off work and also work remote, go to Colorado for, I think I was there for like 14 to 15 days, and including the 4th of July holiday, so just really made it a long stay. So I went a week early, trained in the training hall leading up to the competition, and just kind of live life. It was a really expensive trip at the end of the day, way more expensive than I had budgeted for, and this is really my fault. I didn't plan the trip very well, and the whole thing was very much half-assed, and I think I can admit that now, looking back on it, because a lot of what we're going to talk about today kind of goes into it. But the main theme was I had a lot of just lack of self-acceptance, self-respect, self-love. I was working a job where my boss and my, basically the supporting cast around me, like, really didn't have much respect for me, and that's ultimately out of my lack of respect for myself. I put myself in a position with this company where I just didn't belong, flat out. It was a way for me to make money. I was making more money than I ever had, but really sacrificing my values and my self-worth, to the point where I think internally, like unconsciously, subconsciously, just didn't believe in myself anymore. And when you go against your values like that for that long, I ultimately got that job because I had been fired from a previous job, in which it was the same scenario. So I'm clearly in this cycle of, getting jobs where the job description and the reality of the job didn't match up. Me kind of knowing the types of people I was interviewing with and seeing red flags and ignoring them really wasn't doing myself any favors. Really just agreeing to it because I knew I'd be decently able to perform and could make a lot of money in a sales role that I just really is not ultimately my calling in life. So I'm saying all of this to say that was me seeking security. And in that moment, I was unknowingly seeking death, and the death of myself, because I was sacrificing all of my values and self-worth. And at your core, you know it. Just to take it back to the sticker on my computer, I was like reaching for that word, but the sticker on my computer that says, like, essentially, like, when you're not living up to what you could be. And I think that's really tough. I mean, obviously I'm having trouble finding the words at the moment, because it does bother me so much how much I let it go. And when the alternative is, insecurity and kind of the turmoil of the world, I think that's very scary. That can be a very fearful thing to face. So you just dig yourself deeper into that security, quote unquote, but veiled really is death. So it's kind of like, there's two doors, and behind it, both doors contain death. One is like a death where you die, a bunch, and then you eventually die. And then one door where maybe you live, there's a chance that you live and then you die. And I was choosing what I now know to be the wrong door. So that trip to Colorado was an absolute disaster. Work was going decently well, but the physical part, because I didn't respect myself, or, I wasn't really high on my choices at the moment, kind of subconsciously or unconsciously. I don't think I sabotaged myself, but my performance just wasn't good, what it could be, and my body was kind of falling apart. I had a couple injuries I was nursing that ultimately led to me, still to this day, I haven't posted a real total since March 2023, so well over a year ago, and bombed out of that competition last year. So this topic is definitely near and dear to my heart, and something I know to be true. It's something I've felt personally. So to bring it back to Dante, the last sin that we haven't talked about yet is sloth. And sloth might sound like a cute little animal, but really not all that cute in practice. And what sloth ultimately is the absence of love, or the kind of the lack of pursuit of love. Like, what you love, it's there in front of you, and you're not pursuing it. So really just only a crime against yourself. And I mean, it's maybe a crime against people you potentially could help if you were pursuing your passion, or your skill, or what you could be good at in the world. But yeah, I separated this one out a little bit because I've felt it a lot deeply personally myself, especially when if you get into that mode where you're really kind of betraying yourself like that. I think the number one response is depression, just to shut down. And that's where you get to that point where you feel like you're stuck in the mud and you can't pursue those things that you love, whether it be people, places, or things, a job, whatever it may be. So I feel like it deserved its own episode in a way because they do say that pride's kind of the original sin and it leads to all the others. But I personally think this one, the lack of love, is kind of the key of getting out of the spiral that is, sin or deficient love. So yeah, I'm going to get into that and kind of how I worked my way out of it over the past year. Before we move forward, there is a quote I have from Shakespeare here. So a coward dies 1,000 times before his death, but the valiant tastes of death but once. It seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. So kind of like I was saying with the two doors. At the far end of the doors, death is really the end. So because we're alive, we can choose to not live our truth and die possibly 1,000 times before the actual thing, or we can choose to live. And that might cause us momentary, pain in the moment, like making a painful choice to take a pay cut, or in my case, live in a cheap apartment to go back to school 10 years after undergrad. But I had to make this choice to be able to live, what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And something I coulda, shoulda, woulda did 10 years ago, but I'm really glad I'm doing it now. And the fact that I'm doing it now really confirms the way that I feel every day when I go to school and I'm, doing well on these tests and everything really confirms that I'm making the right choice finally. But that can be tough for a lot of different reasons. Before I get into all that, I did want to take time, really quick segue. I promise I'm going to bring it back. I saw this movie on Saturday. I'm a big movie buff, love going to the movies. I'm actually really sad because Alamo Drafthouse is a great movie theater in Texas and a lot of other places. I'm a big fan of it. All the ones in the Dallas area closed earlier this month. So I've been looking for a new movie theater that's not AMC. No offense to AMC, but I like kind of smaller brands. Smaller branded theaters or even solo kind of independent theaters. It's really my jam. There's a great one here in town, but I just want to branch out, try another one. So I came across Violet Crown, which apparently also has a location in Austin that I just didn't know about. So, yeah, I went to Violet Crown and I saw the movie Tuesday. For those of you who know, it's Julia Louis-Dreyfus from Seinfeld fame. She does a lot of comedy in that show, but she really flexed her drama muscle in this one. So Tuesday, the title character is Julia's daughter in the movie. So Julia plays this girl's mother. She has leukemia or some form of cancer and is terminal. Really, at the beginning of the movie, you can tell, like, not doing well, really kind of close to the end. And the mother character is super in denial. And then one day, basically this giant macaw, it's like a parrot, shows up. It's ugly, it's covered in dirt, has this really rugged voice, but also in a way has a lot of human characteristics and emotions, which I thought was a super interesting choice. But this movie actually turned out to be an incredible commentary on death and a lot of the things that bother us about it. But throughout the whole movie, the daughter, Tuesday, she kind of fearlessly made friends with this bird, in a way, making friends with death. And I thought it was incredible, the way that, she just kind of opened herself up and she kind of accepted, like, hey, this is going to happen, but I could, maybe make death's life a little bit better first. Kind of like love your enemy kind of thing. And it definitely moved me in a lot of ways. And it was just an interesting way of thinking about death. And if you didn't know, Tuesday is a movie by A24 as well, the production company. And they made a lot of my favorite movies personally. Another one I saw recently in the past year was Talk to Me, if you like horror. But yeah, if you look up A24 movies, just look down the list. It's an incredible list of movies. So Tuesday is definitely one you should consider seeing. Definitely be ready for it. It's heavy topics around death. But again, I thought The Bird was a fascinating metaphor for death, and really just puts everything in perspective. So that movie, along with the quote and other things, really all just pointed me to, I kind of knew what this episode would be about because of that. So shout out to that movie, because I think the last 6 months has been pretty tough with some untimely deaths of people, from my past, friends, people honestly with just similar profiles as me. College athletes, Ivy League student athletes, really all smart in their own way. And we had, fathers, which obviously with Father's Day, you kind of think about the family. And I guess in a way, I don't know how to sneak this into the episode, but I do have a little bit of a survivor's guilt. And that is for several reasons I can go over. I guess now is better time than any to move on from the Tuesday movie. So, yeah, I think a lot of us in our daily lives, a lot of the things that people do kind of stem from this fear of death. When I look at even my own actions in hindsight, it kind of goes back to the 7 deadly sins. I think those are linked to it in a way as well. So what that means ultimately is, the purpose of life is to love. And when we're sinning, we have this form of deficient love, either the absent love, perverse love, or too much love. So we're just not kind of using life in the way it was intended, which is, again, to just be present, be here with love. I think this world is very tough on all people, men and women alike, but it is Men's Health Month, Mental Health Month, and I wanted to kind of touch on those that we and I lost. 3 guys from my hometown specifically. Like I said, all student athletes. I knew 2 of them to be good students. One of them, was good enough. He wanted really to just play sports. That wasn't his thing. But the other 2 did kind of study hard, a lot like me. And just seeing all the similarities in the fact that, some of the things they were doing. So, friends of friends, talk, and, life being hard. I think, different aspects of gluttony and greed. There's a lot of, in general with men, there's a lot of overeating. There's a lot of, drinking and driving. There's a lot of sports gambling on apps. There's a lot of womanizing, a lot of dating and using women for sex. And not to say that these 3 guys were into that, but you hear stories, what people are going through, and what they could possibly be using as, like a crutch, for lack of a better term. And I'll say this, I myself have been attached to physical belongings and money and the power you get from earning money, and eating too much food, being overweight, definitely has been a thing. During COVID, I got up to 320 pounds. I'm not proud of it either. I will admit, I have had a little bit too much to drink and got behind the wheel, and I have, engaged in relationships with women where, I wasn't exactly, forthcoming with them about how I felt. So on all of those counts, at some point in the last 10 years, I've been guilty of that. And I think a lot of us men in America right now, it's just easy to say that that's what we do. But it's definitely not aligned with my values. And knowing that, these three guys ultimately were good guys and were engaged in some of these activities and were suffering. I mean, I just know the place that they're in potentially. I do carry a little bit of survivor's guilt because it could have easily been me, behind the wheel of a vehicle, getting in a drunk driving crash. Could easily be me still, 100 pounds overweight and kind of on the path to diabetes or worse. Could be me still chasing all the kind of pleasures of, owning all these physical items and using them to lure women into relationships and, chasing after all that, could easily still be me. So in a way, I had someone ask me today, how I'm doing with all of that loss. And I think for me, it just makes me, it's almost like a, scared straight, wake up call kind of moment. Because there's two ways you can go with that. You can feel that survivor's guilt and slide deeper into kind of sadness, or you can feel that and say, hey, well, I'm still here, so I got to do something. And in my case, I feel thankful that I basically found my personal path, chiropractic school and becoming a chiropractor. And I think through that can reach men and women, but help them get their physical health in order so that, I really think physical health is the kind of the base of the pyramid when it comes to health. So fixing your biochemistry and your physical body can put you in a situation where you can make a better choice. Because having been involved with all the things I mentioned earlier, I think I wasn't always in the right frame of mind because I wasn't treating my body like the temple that it is. I wasn't putting the right things in my body. When you're hungover and full of, bad food, and always chasing, dopamine and trying to make myself feel better with substances, I think it's really easy to get off track and get in those kind of negative feedback loops with your brain chemicals where it's almost impossible to make a better decision. You're just conditioned to do these things over and over on an endless loop because in the physical world, there's limited amount of resources. Like eventually it runs out. Like whatever that source of pleasure is, it does run out. And as we know with, drug addiction, especially, if a heroin addict goes a little bit too far and overdoses, it's because they, couldn't get high from their, the first dose they took. So they had to double it or, I don't know exactly how that works, but eventually it just becomes too much for your body. And I think the same is true of every substance. It just doesn't happen as fast as maybe something like heroin. So, just really, really grateful it didn't get to that point for me. And I was able to kind of figure out my own, biochemistry, for lack of a better term, before it got too far removed from a place where I could reverse it. On the same kind of piece too, So that first part's really all about self-respect, respecting yourself and others enough to not engage in those activities, which definitely I've come to find. I will say, when it comes to the perverse love part, I mean, I can't say I'm really innocent on that front either. I know someone that goes to Harvard and tries to play football. You can't tell me that they don't have maybe a little bit of pride or a little bit of that drive to kind of separate themselves. It's okay to separate yourself, especially if that's exactly who you are. But again, I can't tell you that that's exactly who I am. And through the process of going to Harvard, I definitely saw a lot of privileged people and definitely felt a lot of envy. Definitely felt some anger, which really we all just know is sadness and grief about all that. And again, it's like that all can lead you down that bad path, and again put you in that poor mind frame, poor biochemistry, where you start to use substances and try to fill that void with anything, really. So when it comes to, addicts of any kind, or people who are overweight, or, even people running around, chasing the money, people chasing women, I have a lot of, kind of empathy for that, because once you're in that frame of mind, it's really hard to bust out, and you get really angry, especially men. So again, Men's Mental Health Month, anger is very poisonous. And I think once you become angry, you either get into that kind of overblown love mode where you love good things too much, the lust, gluttony, and the greed, and you oscillate between that and then just an absolute tired depression, where it's like failure to act out of love. And, I basically oscillated in and out of that kind of excessive love and no love for about 10 years, just trying to find my place, trying to come back from, whatever losses I took early on in life that I was angry about. And thankfully for me, at a certain point, you take enough losses, you kind of come to this, I won't say I hit rock bottom, but probably wasn't far from it. Just going to this weightlifting meet in Colorado Springs, bombing out, realizing I was using weightlifting to avoid my actual destiny and responsibilities. And, I was really faced with a choice. I could really continue to drive my life down the wrong path, or I could pick myself up by my bootstraps and find a way, find where I'm supposed to be going. Starting about a year ago, it's probably like April 2023, I know I started the process of getting into Parker, and by September I was in classes, doing a couple prerequisites, and started chiropractic school in January. So just 6 months was all it took for me to kind of change my trajectory. So again, very, very thankful to be here and to have been in a position to make that choice, because I don't take that for granted for a second. And I think accepting the fact that I have this shadow that does hold this anger and this grief, again, respecting myself enough to lay off the excessive stuff, and then ultimately just finding self-love, to get off my ass and get in the game, and figure out what I'm actually supposed to be doing. I think is just, again, so fortunate to have put myself physically in a biochemical state where I could make that choice, and then to genuinely just back it up and execute on it. And it really does start with the self-acceptance, self-respect, and self-love. And that's something that I think all men can learn from. You got to get yourself in your own version of that scenario. And it may take a couple more hard hits before that happens, but I can tell you it's going to be okay. And there are resources out there for you, whether it's your friends, your family, or it may be even a professional. And also, I plan to put out resources in the future in the form of like books and coaching and all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to leave this episode with a couple more quotes, a couple more thoughts, different cool things to look into in regards to this topic. Because again, dying those 1,000 deaths is not fun. So these different quotes and things are just ways to think about this, to get motivated, to not get weighed down by the weight of everything, so that you can keep moving. It's hard to move towards a target when you kind of know the ending. But at least while we're here, we can make this earth more beautiful for ourselves and for other people. So speaking of beauty, one of my favorite authors, Ernest Hemingway, he once said, "Every man has 2 deaths. When he's buried in the ground and the last time someone says his name." I actually heard this on an episode of The Boys. I was watching that on Amazon Prime. And if you know The Boys, it is a show with a lot of death, a lot of explosive death. Almost trivializes it in a way, for the sake of comedy. It is a Seth Rogen production. It's super silly and I love it. But the fact that they fit this quote in with a character named Frenchie, I thought was great. And it just reminds you that, death may not be final. I mean, there's people that we talk about from the past, like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, or even further back than that. I had a quote from Shakespeare from the play Julius Caesar earlier, and Shakespeare's been gone a long time. So I think for me, I definitely want to, kind of promote myself in this life and make sure that I'm taken care of enough so that I can do my work. But then what work am I going to do? I want to do work that, lives on past my time. I think that's really, really important, because that means you helped other people. And oftentimes that means that love was done that work was done out of love. Love definitely lives on. So if I do live on in memory, it's because I did it right. And that ultimately I think is my new target, my new goal, with that. So, but that also brings me to, one of my favorite quotes from James Bond. Where did that quote go? I have so many quotes up, as you can imagine. Oh, yeah. Well, so one of the movies is just called You Only Live Twice. Once when you're born, and once when you look death in the face. So again, just commentary on life and death. And that kind of reminded me, in the vein of the Julius Caesar Shakespeare stuff. It reminded me too of the show Spartacus. There's a whole episode called Mors Indecepta, which means, in Latin, it means death is indeceivable. When I think about that, and even the movie Tuesday, the bird shows up. The bird just kind of looks the girl in the face and says, "Hey, let's go." And the whole movie, he doesn't really waver. He's just like, "Hey, I'm here to take your life." And she kind of told him some jokes, made a friend, and they had the hijinks and all the the different things that happened in the movie. But at the end of the movie, he still takes her life. And really, there's no There's no getting around it. And that, again, brings me back to kind of that Roman time period. Everyone loves Stoic philosophy, so I'll bring Marcus Aurelius back into this. One of his quotes, one of my favorites of his, "Death smiles at us all a man can do is smile back." So really in line with all these quotes, this concept isn't going anywhere. And much like everything in life, I think if we can have a positive, kind of choose the positive outlook on this thing, this indeceivable, not unchangeable thing, really accept this facet of our reality, I think it will allow us to accept all facets of reality. This is really the most brutal one. So working with this, meditating on this, can really help you to just understand the nature of people, what makes them tick. You really start to unpack everything in life that maybe you have judgments about, that keep you from acting in your best interest and your kind of highest self's interest. It can all kind of be derived from this. And when you see something you don't like, are you going to bitch about it for a week, or are you just going to smile back? Put a smile on your face and do what you need to do for you and for your community. Do it anyways. And that attitude is a lot easier said than done. I can tell you myself, that is true. But ultimately, when I did accept it as being true, it makes life a lot easier. You can get up in the morning and go to sleep at night, and in between, you just do all the work that you have to do. You know what the next steps are, and you take them without hesitation. I think it's really important to kind of meditate on. And all of those are to say also, one of my favorite scenes in Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is another show for me. Like when Arya and them always talk about the Lord of Death. What do we say to the Lord of Death? Not today. So again, having that positive attitude, choosing that positive attitude, smile back, say not today. I think people, even in the worst of circumstances, having that attitude can really go a long way and help you, again, if you put yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally in the right, frame of mind. There's a lot you can do in this life. Before it's your time to go, you can accomplish a lot and help a lot of people and help yourself and all that good stuff. So that really brings me to the end of this episode. And I just want to say, thanks for going there with me. I know this is dark content, but I really want to encourage you, as someone who, again, kind of went through a rock bottom-ish moment, went through a lot of pain and trauma, and really ultimately processed it and came out on the other side of it, for sure a much better person. My advice is to live first, and then when it's your time, be able to go with grace. And I'll finish the episode with another quote from Sadhguru, because that's how we started the episode. I really like this one. People who have truly immensely loved each other are ones who will handle the loss of loved ones gracefully. Loss of the loved one gracefully. So I think in that case, it's kind of in the context of maybe a husband and wife. But again, it's like, if you live fully and you don't have any regrets, maybe you have a few regrets, but ultimately no big ones, and maybe regrets ultimately are just stuff that's outside your control. Don't regret things inside your control. which ultimately is very few. Very few things in our life are under our control, but kind of those self-respect pieces on the excessive love part is just be measured with your love. Express your love, but don't do it overly. So, especially for inanimate things, things in this physical world, I think that spiritual love, spirituality in general is kind of infinite. Your internal world is infinite. So if you find something is lacking with the physical world, I always come back to like the idea of a prisoner of war, or something like the Holocaust. I know that's another famous quote by Viktor Frankl, just talking about choosing your attitude in terrible circumstances. I think if you choose self-respect, you choose self-acceptance, and choose love ultimately. Things may not always go your way, but I think in the end you won't have any regrets. And if you live life that way, I think you'll have the opportunity to go with grace. You'll have really experienced everything you want to experience on this earth, and you'll be able to kind of pass on the earth to your children and the next generation. Leave it with them better than you found it. Maybe, I don't know. It's not looking that way now, but we still have time. I know I still have time. But I really just personally feel at peace knowing the path I'm on now. I know that I'm going to leave very few regrets behind, and that makes me feel good about the path I'm on, and being aligned in that way makes it, like I said, really easy to get up in the morning, really easy to go to bed at night, and everything in between just becomes a little bit more effortless. So if you are out there fighting with something, struggling very hard, something feels very difficult, I'm not going to say to turn away from it, because breaking yourself down through that process might be what you need to come back even stronger. But like I said, someone on the other side of that kind of breaking down, building back up process, I can tell you, like, life really isn't that hard. It shouldn't be that hard. If something feels that hard, you're doing something that you're not meant to do. And I'll use the example of, going to Harvard and playing football again. Like, I did it. It's something that I was capable of, but I don't know if it was my highest calling in retrospect. And I don't regret it at all, because it definitely made me a better human being. But that choice, I just don't know if it was the right choice for me at that time. And being able to accept that has let me move on, ultimately. And I didn't accept it for a long time. So kind of had to let a couple of different versions of myself die. Again, letting versions of yourself die to give way to the one that matters. Give way to the real one, the one that is your highest and your best self. That's really, truly powerful. So again, if something feels heavy, it feels awkward, it feels difficult, it might just not be you. It might just be this version of yourself that just doesn't fit. And that's okay. Again, accepting that, respecting yourself enough to let it go, and loving yourself as you still exist. I think those three are key to moving forward in life. And you always have to be moving forward, because that's the only way time goes. So with that, I will encourage you as well. Again, my process, at first, Was more physical than anything as a result of an injury I sustained at the national championships, and just realizing I was avoiding things like transformational weight loss and kind of just the limitations of my physical body. Not accepting that was a big part. So first, getting your physical health in line really goes a long way for your mental and emotional health. But then when your physical body's in line, you're going to feel more aligned with yourself. And then it's really just peeling away all those layers mentally and emotionally of, people that you aren't to basically peeling all those layers off is going to leave what you truly are and leave you free to move forward with the path you're supposed to be on. And again, I feel so fortunate to be on this path for myself, and genuinely hope that you find this path for yourself if that's what you're looking for. If you haven't found it already, I hope that you find it soon. Know that it's definitely not a linear path, and it's going to happen in its own time. So don't force it, but if it's really genuinely who you are, you'll get there. So just choose life. When death comes knocking at your door, just say not today. And I promise you, you will enjoy and respect that decision for the rest of your life. So with that, that's the end of season 2. Still, as always, no ads or anything, but I am going to be taking another step forward with this podcast, business, etc. With the end of season 2 brings season 3 and new beginnings. So thank you for joining me for this episode. I hope you'll join me in season 3 and online, infinite-strength.com. You can find me at Blaine Infinite on Instagram, and I hope to see you around soon.